Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Design Your Life. It's a great episode we're going to have here today. We're going to talk all about expectations. We all have these expectations, whether it be of ourselves, whether it be of other people, relationships, careers. We even have expectations on how the world should work. But what happens when those expectations don't meet reality, or when reality doesn't meet your expectations? And that's what we're really here to discuss today. Because does life become disappointing at that point? Are our expectations unrealistic? So I have with me a return guest, a good buddy of mine, Tyler Reed. Tyler, welcome back to the Design Your Life podcast.
Hey Jim, how's it going? Good to be here. Always nice to see your pretty face on camera.
You're the only one to say that, so you'll
Oh,
you'll
you're
you'll
welcome.
you'll, you'll keep getting the invites.
Yeah, all good.
No, it's great, Tyler. Listen, I always love our chats. I love our chats outside the podcast. I love our chats inside the podcast. So it's always great having you here as a guest. Looking forward to this conversation, as I'm sure you and I have many expectations. And Tyler, what exactly is expectations in your words?
Yeah, I think for me, it's an interesting word actually, because I think sometimes expectations can actually be a dangerous word at times as well.
Mm,
I think expectations, I think a lot of times are what we've learned over the years about how people react to certain things that we do. So if I call my mother on her birthday, my expectation is that she's probably going to be appreciative or happy that I've called on her birthday. And then the flip side of that, where I say sometimes it's dangerous, is that I call my mother and I wish her happy birthday, and she's like, "Okay, well, where's my cake?" So, "Oh shoot, I've never got you cake for 50 years." She goes, "Well, kind of expecting a cake on my birthday," and then this expectation becomes a friction point between us because her expectations and my understanding were not matching.
right.
It's something I talk about a lot in my personal life, and my relationships and stuff like that. But I think healthy expectations I think are good. But then I think there's some not so positive expectations that sometimes the world puts on us. Even sometimes expectations that we think are on us that are not actually there. They're just kind of in our subconscious.
So you said subconscious. I want to lean on that for a moment because it's an important distinction to make. Is where do the expectations come from? Are they ours to begin with, or are they developed over time based off our environment, um, how we grew up?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think it's really couple different pieces of that. Like, and I think I've spoken on your podcast before about not having my father in my life. So, as a child, I had an expectation that I would have a mom and a dad because that is what society kind of teaches you. That is the way the world generally goes. You need to have that. Um, so I kind of had an expectation that I had a loving mom and a loving father and so on and so forth. But when my father wasn't there,
Mm,
then I think it's more of that there's a part of my conscious mind that is demanding you're part of my life because you are the father, and that's what logic or my learnings have taught me in school or other people. But then subconsciously, I don't know if there's an expectation of the father per se, but there's an expectation that a parent's gonna love me.
right,
And I
right,
think that's just something that is in our DNA that we're born with. You know, I'm a religious guy, and so when I go to the Bible, it is all about community. It is all about partnership and communion and so on and so forth. So I think we are created with this desire to be connected with people. So it's almost like the expectation is kind of programmed into our DNA in certain regards.
right, right.
That's how I kind of think about it.
Yeah, no, and I would agree with that. I remember uh, growing up, obviously, very little money. Parents didn't have much. We didn't have much. I often remember kind of moving quite a bit, right? And at the time, I just thought, okay, we moved a lot. Excuse me. Um, but in reality, we just didn't have the money to afford rent. And I look back at it today, and I think, man, like that's it's probably helped shape my need to constantly be moving. So it's interesting how our environment, growing up really shapes our expectation of what life should be like, right?
Oh, immensely. And even, our the people we look up to. I have people in my life that were leaders, caregivers, whatever the case may be, and I have incorporated into my thought process certain expectations based on what their expectations were for them. I won't get into names, but one
Mm,
particular person, there's a certain, expectation about how certain people engage, and completing tasks, we'll call it as an example. Um, and I know for me that sometimes my expectations are a little bit unreasonable, and I actually catch myself after the fact realizing that, oh gosh, like it's really not that big of a deal, but because it's what I've kind of known, then I'm subconsciously or kind of half and half expecting that of other people. And I think in my growth, in my journey, I'm realizing that some of those expectations are not reasonable expectations, but it's all I've ever known. So to me, it makes sense. It's like, yeah, that's normal. That's what it should be. But then for other people are like, you're out of your mind. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're kind of right. Like, I really shouldn't be expecting that out of you, but that's all I've ever known. So to
mm.
me, it's normal. But to you, it's completely unnormal, per se, whatever the
Right,
opposite
right,
word of
right.
normal is. So I agree with you in that context is that, when you think about the wealth, it's how are you supposed to even expect that that's what it's gonna be like when all you've ever known is the other side of the coin kinda thing.
Right,
And I
right.
think expectations, a lot of times that's what it comes down to is what did you learn over your lifetime and where do you want to adjust? Because I know my expectations have changed a lot as far as like especially with my daughter.
Yep,
My
yep.
expectations with my daughter change constantly because she's growing and she's maturing. I'm learning more. I'm learning that a teenage girl is a lot different than raising maybe a teenage boy. Not that I really have the insight, but I'm learning. I'm learning along the way that some expectations are just shouldn't be expectations.
Yeah, so we're kind of, learning, circling back. How do we acquire these expectations, right? We discuss, parents, our environment growing up. But what about social media? So, how much of an impact does now social media play in shaping what our expectations are?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I know for me, social media kills me.
Hmm.
Um, you know, uh, I was, you know, my life 5 years ago was hectic, crazy, just corporate job, single dad, going through divorce, buying a new house. I mean, I was just, I don't know how I got through it all. Um, and I was very present on social media as I was doing all of those things, right? So I had a presence because I'm meeting the expectation to share in my life, I guess is the way I looked at it. And now that I find that my life has slowed down, quite a bit, and not being so crazy and hectic, that I'm not as present on social media. But then I do know that when I go on to social media and I'm like, "Ah, man, like I didn't do enough stuff today. I didn't do enough family things today. I didn't do enough work today. I didn't do enough posts today." Like
Hmm.
there's this constant, it's right here. There's an instant reminder that you're not meeting expectations the second you pick up that phone, right? Um, I've actually kind of learned to resent my phone in some ways because, nowadays the expectation is sort of, I sent you an email. Why didn't you get back to me in 5 minutes?
Right.
Well, 20 years ago, you sent me an email, I might get back to you in a couple days, right? Like it's
Yep.
just the expectations now is because everybody's so glued to their phone, we expect things to be, done right away. And I find social media, especially for kids, like when I look at like my kids that are in my family and around
Hmm.
and the kids that are involved in social media and how like my niece has a good example one day. We were going somewhere, I can't remember what it was, and she's like, "Well, am I gonna have my phone?" And I'm like, "I don't know." I said, "You'll have your phone. I don't know if it's gonna work or not because you might lose your signal." And she goes, "Well, how am I gonna get in and give my daily food to my Tamagotchi?" some kind of a game or something like that.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
was
yeah.
like, "Give your food to who?" And she goes, anyways, my Tatamaguchi character or whatever, and you have to feed him. If I miss one day that I lose my streak." And I'm like, "Okay, I don't know what we're gonna do about that, if I'm being honest." And she was really visibly troubled by
Sure.
she's gonna miss one day because your streak is at 70 some days or something like that. And I'm like, wow. So for me, for kids, that's an unhealthy expectation that the phones are teaching them. Like she can't go be present somewhere.
Obviously, children, and when I say children, I'm not talking young. I mean, well, I'm 48. I
You're
won't
still a
share
child,
your
Jim.
age on, but I'm talking like our adult children and stuff like that. Like their use of social media is way beyond ours, and I would guess that it's their children is going to be even more. So
Mm,
how much are expectations changing, and how much of our children's expectations are formed out of how they either grew up or were raised versus what they're seeing and what they've grown up with on social media. How does that really change their expectations, right? Because I mean, you just shared the story about your niece, right? That was visibly upset of this expectation of this digital pet, which is what
mhm.
it is,
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it
right?
is. Thank you. Yeah,
Um, so how do we well, I don't want to say really how do we combat that. We'll kind of get to that, a little later on, but man, how important it is to understand how much social media affects the expectations of our children and their children after, and so on
yeah.
and so forth.
Well, honestly, I mean, it scares me, Jim, if I'm being honest. I
Hmm.
mean, if I go look at generationally, like I look at my mother, and if she's never on social media again, she couldn't care less. So her expectations are still the ones that she was groomed with growing up
Hmm.
as a child, right? My expectations are groomed by what her expectations were for her childhood and also what I've been learning from the external sources such as social media, work, so on and so forth. But now for our kids, I feel like it's getting even worse because now it's my mother's expectations, my expectations on my daughter, right? Because my
Right,
mother's
right.
expectations flow down to me, then
Sure.
my expectations get layered onto that, which then flow down to her. And then on top of all of that, she is, I mean, your right hand is your phone if you're under the age of 18 or
Mm.
even 25, even nowadays. I'm not even sure. So I really worry about, you know, you and I have learned through our trauma related things with our parents and expectations and failing and all these kind of things. And that was just our parents' influence of their parents. It wasn't because they
Right,
were
right.
watching social media. So
Sure, sure.
so think about when my daughter gets older, she's gonna have my mother, mine, hers, and all of the influences of social media or cable or whatever have had on her over the years that I believe that, it's almost like my mom's expectations, my expectations, her expectations.
Mm.
Um, because of all these other influences that are coming into her brain. Like, for a young girl, what are you supposed to look like? What are you supposed to wear? Right. And
Yeah.
I mean, listen, that's always been present. But I don't think it was ever this present
No, no.
where a young teenage girl going through her, I'm talking about that because I have a young teenage girl. Um, and it's not even about what dad's expectations are. It's like, look at what the world is wanting me to be. I can't even imagine how to process that as a young kid. I really don't. So in my household, my daughter doesn't have social media, no TikTok, no Instagram. She uses YouTube and Roblox, I think. Now she has some influence in social media, of course, but I don't allow her to have social media as of right yet. Because I'm really afraid of all of those negative influences that are gonna make her feel a certain way. Now, you know, I wish there was positive social media that I could have her look at only where it's people talking about accept yourself, be who you are, like all the good stuff that's out there. Because there is a lot of good stuff out
Sure.
there too. Just sometimes you can't find
Yeah.
it in all the chaos and the mess, right? But when you open up your phone and, every girl over the age 18 has an OnlyFans account, you're like, you know what I mean? Like, how am I, like, not every girl I know, but it seems to be. And it's, how am I supposed to tell my daughter when she turns 18 and says, well, dad, everybody else is doing it,
Right.
right? Well, just
Yeah.
my expectation is that you're not going to. But you know what I mean? There's so much influence on her. I'm scared about that. I'm not going to have a say in what she decides to do or not do because she's going to feel so much pressure from the social media to do certain things to belong and to fit in and to build her following base and all that kind of jazz, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, pressure, social media, friends. Yeah. Um, Now, before we move on to, kind of expectations we put on ourselves, right now we're just talking about, what is an expectation? Where does it come from? Is it ours? Let's just lastly touch on quickly here past relationships and how that kind of shapes our expectations as well, right? I've been in two failed marriages. My expectation of relationships going forward are really shaped by those experiences, right?
Mm.
How much of past relationships do we allow to control our future relationships or ourselves?
That's a great question, Jim. And I was actually going to ask you directly back to yourself and saying,
Mm.
wouldn't it be nice to go into a new relationship without those expectations from the previous
Mm.
relationships?
Yeah.
To some extent.
Right. Right. Right.
Because I know for me, yeah, same. I mean, almost the same. I've had, I don't want to use the word fail. I'm going to use,
Sure.
I had a marriage that we decided to not continue because I don't necessarily think that we failed at it. I think that we were very young when we got together. And I think that as we matured and as you grew and had real understanding of how the world works and what our real goals are, and I think that my ex-wife and I just had different expectations about what we were wanting in life. And then in life, how does that correlate into the marriage? And I think we both agreed that it just wasn't kind of meeting our needs at this stage anymore. And then the next relationship, not quite a failed marriage, but a failed engagement, we'll call it. But same thing there. It was just, a lot of love for each other, but the expectations, in a lot of ways were convoluted. Same thing. I came in from my marriage and I sort of expected things to be a certain way or had hoped they would be a certain way. And the same time on the other side coming in with, a not so healthy marriage and those unhealthy needs in that marriage were then brought over to our relationship, and the expectation was to fill the gap in those
Sure.
not so positive environments. And the reality it is that that's an it's an unequated expectation because I can't fix what happened in the past.
Right.
Um, there's nothing I could do about that, and to expect me to make someone feel a certain way to compensate for something in the past, generally speaking, that's not going to ever work out. Um, so I think the thing is, I think then the counter side of that is that now that I am at the age that I'm at, and I've gone through a marriage and an engagement, my expectations now are probably really negatively affecting my ability to be in a new relationship.
Right.
Um, because now I have such a high standard of what I'm willing to commit myself to in a relationship, um, that it's very difficult to date as an older person. Because the thing is, when you're 20 years old, you're kinda learning the world, you're developing your expectations, you're developing your beliefs, you're still developing so many things, so I think cohesively, you can kinda learn each other and learn what to expect from each other and grow together, but I think we are coming in 20 years later, you come with a pile of stuff, I come with a pile of stuff, and it's how do we meet the expectations or needs of each other, that are feasible things. And I found that was probably the largest problem I had in my last relationship was, the inability for either one of us to concede to the other person to meet their needs or expectations because we felt like we did that in our previous relationships and we weren't really willing to give much space for that.
Right.
Um, Yeah, so I think I really wish there was no expectations in general and that you just get to meet the person and see if you like them and grow from there. But unfortunately, it's just not our way our brain works. No matter what you do consciously or subconsciously, you're gonna get triggered, you're gonna be upset, you're gonna be sad, you're gonna be happy, you're gonna be loved. But it's those expectations are not always met necessarily. Then sometimes we bring negative feelings into the conversation. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think that'd
mean,
be my
we have our own expectations that we want met, right? But how often do we even communicate those expectations up front, right? Um, I guess I would say on that as well is, going through, say, two marriages, and it's really hard sometimes when you also don't know yourself. Like I
mm,
can speak from experience. My expectation going into my first marriage was really solidly built off of what I didn't have growing up,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So I had children at a young age. My expectation was, okay, I got to be this father figure, right? Because I
mm,
didn't have that. I'm sure you can relate to that. So that was my expectation, which wasn't fair to my ex spouse in any way, shape, or form. That's just what I thought being a proper partner was, because of the preconceived expectation that I created for myself based off not having it growing up, right? And then moving into my second marriage, again, it was just built on preconceived expectations of me not really understanding who is Jim, underneath all these layers of trauma and growing up past, relationships and all that. And, I met this wonderful person who was just vibrant and just brought out the life in me. Right.
mm,
But then again, it was preconceived expectations of, man, I'm supposed to be this person. But and I don't know if you felt this in relationships, but that constant struggle or battle of who you think you're supposed to be to meet somebody else's expectation versus, okay, who am I really? What expectation am I meeting? I was talking to you before before this episode about somatic breathing.
mm.
So I went to somatic breathing last night with my current partner Melissa, and
Oh, so you actually go somewhere to do it? Oh, I
yeah.
thought you were just doing it in your home, like watching
No,
YouTube.
no,
You put some
no.
headphones on.
This is with a great lady who's been a guest on my podcast, Alex Tabler.
Oh,
No, she does it, and I went last night with the intention of really peeling back the layers and really discovering, man, who am I
mm,
beneath all the expectations I've put on myself or people have put on me, or a combination of all of it. Oh
yeah,
man, oh my god, I tell you, and you got to experience. I can't, for anyone that hasn't done it, I apologize. It's going to sound probably corny for a lot of people, but I got to this level, just this meditative state, where it's like, man, there I am, right? And then coming back, because I won't go into details, but
almost like you were looking at yourself.
yeah.
Yeah, out
Um,
of body
but
experience.
but
Yeah.
coming back and going through it, I literally just broke down in tears.
Mm,
It was the oddest thing, because now I'm coming back and I'm like, oh shit, I'm back in this body,
mm,
in this life of preconceived expectations that I've either put on myself or have others put on me. Not to fault of theirs. That
yeah. No,
obviously
I
I
understand. Yeah,
get to choose
yeah.
that, right?
It was always like the heaviness
Um,
of the expectations that are
mm,
in your body all came rumbling back, and
yeah,
that
yeah,
weight was
yeah,
back
yeah,
on you again. It was almost like, "I can breathe," and then you came
yeah, yeah,
back, and
yeah,
you're like,
yeah,
"Oh, the
yeah.
heaviness of everything is still there," and how do you get
Right.
out from under that? Is that kinda
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
kinda like that.
and that's why I wanted to do this. Well, not because that episode. I was thinking this prior to
Yeah,
the
sure.
breath work yesterday, obviously,
Yeah,
because I had
yeah,
this
yeah,
pre planned out. But it really opens up the light to how much of what we expect today really belongs to us
yeah.
versus what was
Oh,
projected
bro.
onto us, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something I continue to struggle with in my journey of my own healing and
Mm,
self-discovery is trying to get out from underneath all the weight of everything else to find it. Who am I really underneath it at all?
right.
Because yeah, I mean, I think, I go back to my relationships as well. I mean, in my marriage, there was sort of an expectation about who I was. I was the guy that took care of the house. I was the one that managed the finances. Um, I had to be the leader. I had to be the fixer. I had to be the confidant. I had to be like I really was so deep into what my identity expectation
Mm,
was that I don't think I really ever discovered who I really was underneath all
right.
of that. And then I think after my marriage and going into being separated, I fell right into what I was not expecting to happen because my father and mother split when I was young, and I really didn't want that same situation for my daughter.
Yep.
I never put an expectation on myself that I would never be like my father. I think you and I've talked about it before. I can't stand that thought process. I am who I am because of who I want to be, not because of what my father wasn't. Um, but I also know that when the marriage was breaking down, that I held myself to a standard and expectation that I will be a present father with my daughter no matter the circumstances, and I won't let anybody get in the way of
Mm,
me holding myself accountable to that. But then fast forward, into, another relationship, and then the expectations I was holding myself to were starting to get blurred, because of the friction I would experience on one side and the friction I would experience on the other side. I was starting to lose focus on being the present father I needed to be because I'm trying to appease the mother of my child for what her expectations are as an ex-husband and a shared custody of a daughter. And then I had other expectations about who this new person was in this new relationship and who I'm supposed to be and how I'm supposed to manage that. And so I do remember at one point, I think I've shared before, I converted to being a believer in God about 5 years ago. And not long after that was when I realized that I am losing myself.
mm,
I truly am losing myself in all of this other expectations of other people. I don't really even know when I go home in my relationship, I don't actually know who's showing up because
right.
I'm
Right.
so bogged down in my thought process about how I'm supposed to be or say or talk or
Hmm.
act or whatever. And then even when I was then not home and then I'm on the other side going to spend time with my daughter, then I'm wondering what her mother is expecting so I was starting to get to the point where I was really physically, mentally, spiritually starting to break down because I just couldn't even understand what I was even supposed to do anymore.
Right.
And that's when I kind of walked away from everything and just said, I need to kind of hold on to myself. I need to rediscover myself and what are my expectations moving forward. And then, ironically enough, once I got into the driver's seat of what my expectations were for me, and I was healthy in that, then I was able to make a lot better decisions for myself and for my daughter and manage those relationships in a more healthy way and keep what's healthy and remove what's not healthy. Um, so I think it's interesting because, the very opening commentary, we were saying about good expectations, bad expectations. And I think as much as we have those externally, I think internally we also have to dilute those a little bit. Like, what
Well,
is a healthy expectation to put on myself?
and that, great segue because, we're going to jump into that now, which is the expectations of ourselves, right? And I think many of us are actually harder on ourselves than anyone else.
Oh,
It's a common
absolutely.
thread. I think we can all, agree with that.
Yeah.
But why is that? Like why do we constantly feel behind? And why do we compare ourselves to others? And before we jump into that, question, I use, and I use this podcast for example, um, because listen, this is not, well, I'm not a mainstream podcaster by any means. I have 27. What do I have? 27 followers on YouTube, and my most viewed video was 160 people. Right.
The
Now,
160 people that you got to touch.
a year in,
Yeah.
and had I stuck to the expectations that I had on myself, that I need to grow this thing to be what it, to be a million followers, or to incorporate the expectations of other people on social media, and what other people are doing, and comparing myself to others, this podcast would not exist. You and I would not be having this
Yeah.
conversation anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I made a conscious choice to, adjust that, because my expectation is not to have a million followers with this podcast. My expectation is simply that, first of all, this is self healing for
Yeah.
me.
There you go. I was gonna
Um,
poke you a little bit there.
yeah. And to your point, whether I reach one person, man, I'm okay with that. But,
Yeah. Amen.
we're so hard on ourselves, and I would have given this up a long time ago had I stuck with that. And don't get me wrong, it crossed my mind. It's,
Mm-hmm.
wow, is this really going to take off? And then I was like, well, why
Mm.
am I doing this?
Mm.
What is the expectation here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
how hard are we on ourselves? Why do we compare ourselves to so many different people?
Well, I think you really answered your own question, Jim. Being
Mm,
honest, I mean, I was gonna poke right back to you and say, literally almost the entire conversation we had up to this point, right, is the goal or the want was I want to do this podcast because it's for my own healing and it's going to give me a lot of things out of it, and that is my purpose. That's why I'm doing this. Then the expectations come into place, and everything you said, your expectations are influenced by what social media provided to you,
mm,
right? So, the podcast that I watch on TikTok, the guy has 45,000 followers. Every one of his videos watch is 15,000 views, blah, blah, blah. Oh, okay. Well, if I'm a podcaster, that's what the expectation is. So
right.
if I'm not there, then I'm not good enough, or my content isn't good enough, or people don't like me enough, and all these negative things start to come into your brain. Um, and honestly, man, I mean, even let's take all of our outside influences and park them. All of our parents, take all that crap out of it. Every external expectation that we've ever been influenced in our entire life, and let's just stay on. I want to be a happy, healthy, productive person in this life, regardless of what anybody else's expectations are. And that alone, you want your podcast to succeed. You want to be able to help people. Like there's all these things that are expectations because we are human beings, and we are programmed to want to see people happy. We are programmed to, not want to struggle with our depression and all these different things. So, um, I think what I've been trying to do a lot more of, and exactly what you had said, is my expectation of myself is to sit in this chair, turn on the screen, and say my what I want to say because that is what I need, and I have to let the rest of the world dictate where that goes, and I really try not to have an expectation around that. But I agree with you 100%, and I struggle with that constantly. Where it's I have this, uh, you know, anyone that knows me because I have ADHD, which I know we'll talk about later another time, but I go to bed at night with 30 things in my brain that
Mm,
I'm going to achieve today because I feel motivated, I feel energized, and I'm ready to kick the world's ass. And then I wake up and I start to challenge the ADHD, and it's so overwhelming that I get two things done. But because my expectations last night were so high that
mm,
today I struggle with failure all day because I just
right.
can't meet that standard. And I'm working with my ADHD to better dial it in to help me achieve the things I want to achieve rather than it being a deterrent to those things. And that is a struggle. I'll be quite honest. It's been a struggle.
It would be, and it leads into a great question that I had for this podcast, actually. Why do we feel guilty for resting? Why do we believe we should always be productive? It's a great segue into that, because where does that belief of that productiveness if that's even a word. I believe it is.
It is for
Where does it
today.
come from? Why why are we so driven to be productive? And we don't allow
Environment,
ourselves
man.
to rest, really be with ourselves and really well, I'll say enjoy life. But listen, I get that there's successful people enjoying life beyond a level we probably don't understand, or are they?
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Well, on
I
social
guess
media there, that's the
right,
problem. Social media
right,
doesn't
right,
post the bad
right,
stuff, right? You don't post social media saying, "God, today I just wanna die. I hate my life." And like, you don't post that kind of stuff.
right. So
You know, you
where does your expectation come from of having to achieve all those things in a day?
Yeah, it's outside influences for sure. Um, I really I and a good example of that would be, I don't remember when it was, but I remember at one point in my in a newer relationship, there was a lot I was trying to I was working a corporate job, 9 to 5 corporate job, very, very high stress, very high demand. I was also the leader of an executive board for a youth, sports, um, league or whatever.
Hmm.
Plus, I had a laundry list of things on the go, and I was on my phone constantly because I just had so many things that I had to get done in a run of a day. I was on my phone constantly, and then the conversation came up, said, "You're never fully here because you're always sort of half there and half here,"
Right,
and I
right.
took it to heart. So anyway,
Hmm.
so I made an agreement at that point that, you know what, for the next couple weeks, I'm just gonna take a breather. So I'm gonna stop posting on social media. I'm gonna let my team worry about this, da 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 da. And you know what really happened to me was that expectation level just dropped almost every day that I disengaged all the things that the world was calling me to be or calling me to do or whatever they wanted from me. So, I struggle with it a lot being in St. John because I was in Toronto for, basically my entire adult life. So for 20 years, I was in a very fast paced environment, career. I mean, everything I did was fast. The amount of things I would get done in a normal day compared to a lot of other people, especially with ADHD, was significant. I remember at work, people always used to call me the fixer, and I'd say, "Well, why do you call me the fixer?" And they say, "Because anywhere there's an area of the business that there's a problem, they put me in it, and within a couple days, I come out and I have a either a solution or an answer, whatever the case may be." And that is what my role was at the business. Um, because I work at such a fast pace, I could get to answers usually pretty quickly. But
Hmm.
now what happens is I find now that I'm in a city that is obviously a little bit slower pace and my lifestyle is a bit slower pace. I can't get rid of that feeling that I need to deliver an enormous amount of things every single day to be productive. So I would go to my job from 7 to 5:30, and I'd be driving home saying, "Wow, did I ever get a lot done today? What a great day. I'm ready for tomorrow. I got those meetings done. I hit my deadlines. I got my budget, blah, 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 blah." And then I could go home and relax because I felt like I hit my production criteria for the day, if that kind of makes sense.
Sure.
And now I'm finding because I don't have all of those pressures on me that now rather than those external pressures that I'm trying to achieve, it's my own internal pressures that I'm trying to achieve, but I don't have anybody to answer to. I don't have to answer to a boss. I don't have to answer to a VP. I don't have to answer to anybody. So it's something my therapist and I actually talk about quite a bit. Um, because with the ADHD in my work environment, other people's expectations I never missed, right? Because that is what I needed to do, and that's how I need to be successful at my job. But in my personal life, if I don't if I don't get X, Y, and Z done today, nope, nobody's gonna be
Right.
harping at me for it, and I find sometimes that is almost the challenging part of it because then if I'm not holding myself accountable
Sure.
to meeting those expectations today, then I feel like I've let myself down,
Yeah,
and I really
accountability.
do struggle with it.
That's a whole episode on itself.
Yeah, it is, and I
On top
really
of
do
that one.
struggle with that accountability because the ADHD really
Sure.
gets in the way of being able to achieve the things that you and the other thing too is that, look, when I made a list last night of 30 things, it probably should have been 5, right? But it's just your brain
Right,
gets
right,
worked. You're
right.
like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, let's pause here for a second. I want to pose a question to the audience, those of you that are hanging on or listening or taking in the content. What unrealistic expectations have you placed on yourself? So, I would what's the word? I would suggest to you that maybe pause the episode here. Ask yourself that question. What unrealistic expectations have you placed on yourself? Really just sit with that, for a moment, and then feel free to come back to the episode, play it. We are going to go on a little longer. And with that said, Tyler, we're going to jump into to the next topic here, which really is, what are the expectations that we're placing on others? We talked about kind of the
Mm,
expectations we have on ourselves that others have placed on us. But what about the ones we place on others? And, I want to kind of jump into here because, I'll give a story that really has shaped my life. And I'm not sure I really understood how much so, how much of an impact it has had outside of the last couple of years, just kind of rediscovering who I am. And, I mentioned the breath work last night and really find who is Jim, right? I remember being in school. My father used to work as a janitor in the school with me. And, he used to, his expectation of me was why can I not be like this other child who's super smart, getting great grades, and all that, right? And that really at the time didn't sit with me. At the time, I'm sure I asked myself the same question. Well, shit, why am I not doing that? What's wrong with me,
mm,
right?
yep,
And you kind of carry that into life, and then I started thinking, well, geez, what expectation did I put on my children? What
yeah,
expectations did I put on my past relationships
yep,
that were unrealistic? Right? Because that one really sat with me, right? I like to think I do a great job with my children, really letting them kind of become into their own, without a ton of expectations. But listen, I'm sure we all have done it, right?
hmm
So let's jump into that, because this is where relationships really become interesting.
mm,
Because
yeah.
what unrealistic expectations do we have on our loved ones, on people we're with every day, right?
I know for me, expectations is something that I'm really learning to navigate, especially raising a teenage daughter because, a great lesson that my ex-wife and I are really great friends, and maybe I'll have her on the podcast one day and talk about how do you co-parent and still be great friends underneath it all. Um, but I remember, I was having some real friction points with my daughter around what I was expecting either from her or expecting that if I help you understand something, my expectation was then you would be able to understand and shift the way your thought process, or don't be so hard on yourself, or whatever the case may be. Um, and what I'm learning is that sometimes doesn't work no matter how many different ways from the sun that you try to have it happen. And what her mother really taught me was a really great lesson was you don't need to fix everything for her. Not every problem she has needs a solution. Not everything that she talks about needs an answer. And some days she just doesn't feel great and her emotions are all over the board because she is a young girl going through, you know, um, those girl changes that happen with a girl. See how good I know, I don't know what to call it. But anyways, as she's going through her body changes and her womanly stuff and whatever, um, her expectation is dad's just gonna be a safe place for me to go when I'm not feeling great and grab a hug, and that's all I needed of him today, and that's what her expectations are out of me. But my expectations is that when I tell her, "Don't feel so bad because you have so much to be happy about," or this, that, and the other thing, I mean, she doesn't care. She doesn't
No.
care what I believe she should be thinking or feeling, or that the logic of my brain is saying you shouldn't feel that way because you're misunderstanding or you're misinterpreting the information that you're getting. All she wants is dad to give her a great big hug and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
I'm sorry you're having a crappy day. You want to go get some ice cream?" But my expectation is that because I'm the father and I've done this my entire life and all my relationships is I'm the fixer. Remember I said that earlier?
Mm.
I'm the fixer.
Yep.
So when I see my daughter struggling, I just want to jump in and fix it. But what her mother has taught me is that sometimes I need to jump in and just hug her. Don't try and fix it. And I'm really learning, but I'm struggling with that as well because when I see her not in her best place, I put an expectation myself as a father to fix it.
Yeah.
And what my ex-wife is helping me understand that the expectation of support of myself is about being her safe, loving father because I don't need to actually fix anything for her. And I'm really struggling with changes. So my expectations on myself um, are sometimes unhealthy for Abigail, but they're healthy for me because that is what I think will help her get to a better spot. So it's interesting because in my brain, my expectations are actually good expectations that can help her. But in her brain, my expectations are actually hindering her and not providing a safe environment for her just to grab a hug from her dad.
Yeah, and I don't
Um,
think we realize how much we project our expectations onto people, right?
mm,
Or and it's not out of a lost, it's out of caring and love and what we believe to, to be that. It's one of the reasons that I created the journal between us, right? Which is really to give a safe place to communicate.
mm,
Because how often do we think people really should communicate back, the way we do? Because like you just said, we just want to be a fixer, right? And we
yeah.
feel like we want to fix the problem, instead of just listening and just be in that safe space just to hold that space momentarily, right?
Hmm.
So I'm kind of glad you shared that story because that's all we want to do is fix it. And our
Yeah,
expectation
exactly.
is, hey, like this is how I would do it, or this is what I would do, and not really taking into account. Well, wait a minute, I'm not.
Well, and the thing is, and I'm trying to ask a 13-year-old girl to see the world the way that I see the world, and
Mm,
that's never going to happen.
right, right,
And
right.
and so what I'm learning in my expectations is that um she inevitably will not meet many, many, many of the expectations that I have on her as a daughter and a father. And I think what I'm learning is that there's a balance there. Like I had a good chat with her. I think it was last week. We have some what I like to call daddy lessons, and sometimes they become friction points. But I told her that you need to understand that Mom and I love you very much, and we want nothing but the best for you, and I wanna be your friend all the time. But sometimes I do need to be your father, and there are certain expectations that I have as a member of this family that you treat people with kindness and respect from the get-go. You assume people all have positive intent when they're engaging with you. Like, I expect you to treat people with kindness. Um or I expect you not to be on social media, in a chat room somewhere with somebody that you don't know and sharing pictures of yourself. Like, that is an expectation that I'm not willing to compromise
Right,
on.
right.
And I told her that you just need to understand that some things are about your well-being and your safety, and you may not understand them today, and that's okay. But then there are other expectations that daddy needs to learn and be better at, and I'm willing to compromise on some things that I believe I expect out of you being the fixer. I'm willing to accept that I can't expect you to just hear what I'm saying and apply it because maybe you have no idea what I'm actually really trying to explain to you because you don't have the life experience that your father has. So I always I've gotten a lot better with that, I think, with her, and I think she's also getting older now. She's 13. She can have a more mature conversation about understanding why there's an expectation in certain areas and why in other areas there's some leniency around expectations.
But it really does make you pause and just think about how many arguments, are really just unmet expectations that, we have on the other people or they have on us. And, is it really
Unmet needs.
fair? Yeah. And is it fair to expect someone to meet expectations, we really haven't communicated, right? Man, we unpacked a lot here, and thank you for our viewers for really sticking with us through this. It's such an important topic because it really does, in my opinion, drive how happy one can be, right? Because we have so many expectations on ourselves, on our family, so many expectations that people have on us. But now we're going to talk, and we're really going to shift here a little bit and just cover one more topic in this discussion, which is really the expectations that we have on the world, right? The biggest expectation might be the one that we have on life itself.
Yeah, sure.
We have a general belief that life is fair, life should be fair, right? But the point I'm trying to make here is we have this expectation on the world that life is somehow supposed to provide us what we need and that it's
Mm,
just supposed to be fair and that we're all supposed to be equal.
yeah, that big world entitlement, right? We feel like we're entitled to so many things, and I feel like we're
Yeah.
getting worse and worse as we go on. Our expectations of, um, I don't know. I don't have a great answer for that one. I know I'll give you an example, of one moment that I had a reflection about expectations of the world versus what I expect. An example of that would be anyone that is in St. John obviously knows that our hospital is not the quickest
Mm,
place to get in and out of.
right, right.
And I remember I had to go up to the hospital for some kind of an outpatient X-ray or something like that. And I remember I went into the very front of the building where you do the you check in or whatever.
Triage.
And there's like, yeah, triage or whatever, or not even in the ER, more like
Oh,
in
no.
this
Okay.
just
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah. Right.
regular front door,
Right. Right.
whatever
Right.
it was. And I remember I was standing there and they had a little number thing. So I grabbed my number and I was like 197 and they were serving like 162. And I was like, oh man, I'm 30 people away from just registering to go get my x-ray. Like, wow, like how inefficient is this? Um, but anyway, so as I'm standing there and I'm kind of going through my thoughts and I'm not really overly I don't really care either way because I'm standing anyway, so I'm standing around and I hear people agitated, quite a bit. I can't believe it's taken this long. Look at the lineup. Why don't they have more booths open? Why isn't there this? Why like just listening to all this
Mm,
noise and this environment. And I'm just sitting there looking around. And then I looked up at the ceiling and I was like, well, I don't know, but you guys are all worried about, but I know for me, my expectation is that a bomb's not going to fall into this hospital and kill all of us in about 10 minutes because in other places in the world, that's what's happening.
mm.
So I don't care if there's one booth open. I don't care if I'm here for 10 hours. I'm just happy that I don't have to worry about this hospital being blown up at any given moment.
It brings up the conversation of really just being grateful for what we do have, right? Being grateful is kind of what I go back to, right? To your point,
Yeah.
like, hey,
Well,
we're
I think,
grateful we have a hospital to go to,
yeah, absolutely.
right?
Yeah. And I think it's one of these things that you don't know what you don't know. Right.
Mm,
And so I think, um, I believe, I go back to your sentiment. I believe the world is fair. I think there's a lot of fairness in the world, and I think that where we struggle with the world being fair is because we're not necessarily getting all the things that we want or all the things we need or whatever the case would be, and then we blame everything around us except ourselves, which is kind of potentially dangerous path because then you're putting all these expectations. Say, well, if I want to be a millionaire, it's my fault that I'm not a millionaire, not the world.
mm.
Um, but there's a lot of truth in that, right? We all have the ability to do great and amazing things, and I think, um, I always kind of look at it like the day I'm sitting on my deathbed, and I'm knowing it's my final hour on this earth, and I contemplate and think about all of my life and all the things I achieved or all the things I wanted to achieve, what didn't happen to me, what did happen to me, and you're just gonna go through your life, right? And I think the thing is that I feel like when I'm that age, hopefully it's a long time from now, that I'll be sitting there going that, you know what? Yeah, maybe there were a lot of obstacles in my way. Maybe, I grew up without a father. Maybe I was hurt and all these different things that influenced my decisions in my life. But I can't blame the world because I can't keep blaming the world because dad wasn't there, right? It's not the world's fault that my father wasn't there. So for me to expect people to be a certain way with me because my father was and because it's a need that I've not had fulfilled in a context of feeling wanted, I guess. I can't think of a better way of saying that right now, but I never really felt wanted by my father.
Mm.
Um so I can keep walking through life blaming everybody in the world about why I'm not achieving this, I'm not achieving that, and why am I not loved? Why am I not this? And blah 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 blah. But under all of that, the only person that's really the driving force behind that is me. Um, if I want to feel loved, I can love myself. Just haven't learned how to do it.
Right, right.
If I want to achieve greatness in podcast, the opportunity is there. It's just maybe I'm not putting the work in. Maybe like there's like I think the world is fair when we understand that things in life are not entitlement. There's things that are earned. There's things you have to work towards.
How much has social media tainted our expectations on the world? And what I mean by that is, our excessive need to have instant gratification and our excessiveness to compare ourselves to others. Because when I look at the expectations that we have on the world, I can't help but wonder how much of that comes from just our ability to now to see what everybody else is doing in the world.
Oh, absolutely, brother.
Right.
Absolutely.
So how has that really changed our expectation of the world? Just having the ability to see how successful an individual is, or thousands of individuals, and then really, allowed that, or created that sense of comparison. That, man, like,
Mm.
why can I have this, right?
And the funny thing is I would challenge anybody listening to this podcast and go on the social media and find the expectations of challenge being in a positive light. So we go on the social media and we say, okay, well, I don't know. In Switzerland, they have free healthcare. It's a 1 hour in, 1 hour out, blah 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 blah, and that is all we compare it to. Is that standard of an elevated standard?
Mm.
You don't see anybody going on Facebook going, "Hey guys, I went to the hospital today. I was there for 10 hours, but did you see this hospital in Gaza that was blown up where the kids couldn't even get any treatment? Wow, I'm really fortunate to have a hospital that I can go to and not feel that I'm going to get killed." We don't do that because our standard is not in a foreign country somewhere where they don't know how they're gonna eat or get water for the next 5 days. We don't appreciate what we have compared to that. We delineate that I'm not as good as those guys, and I want the good stuff. I wanna go to the promised land, and that's all we focus on is where can I go that it's better and better and better and better for me? Not realizing that I am one lucky son of a gun that last year I had 5 trips to the hospital in an emergency health crisis that could have killed me. And my bill was at the end of the day, I got $130 bill because you have to pay for the ambulance that
Yeah,
my
yeah.
benefits covered anyways. So I was in the hospital for 12 days. I had emergency surgery. I had tubes and nurses and doctors and specialists and janitors and people cleaning my room, people changing my bed, the nurses helping me, get ready to take it. Like the amount of people around me to make sure that I got healthy and I could walk out those doors was astronomical. And the cost of that, I can't even imagine how much that would have cost if I
Mm.
had got a bill at the end of it all.
Right.
So I am nothing but thankful that I have a hospital in my city that I can go to, and if I'm dying, they will save my life and not charge me a cent for it. Um, But it's very, very hard for a lot of people to then be appreciative of that when I see something on TV about a different healthcare system in a different
Mm,
part of the world that functions better than ours. For whatever the reasons. I don't really know. Honestly, don't really care.
sure.
I appreciate the fact that I had everything I needed to make sure that I lived and that I could see my daughter again. I could come home and see my dog, and I didn't have to worry about getting shot when I leave. I don't have to worry about a bomb dropping on me. I don't have to worry about a $35,000 bill because I'm sick and it's either, well, I can't really afford to be healthy, so I guess I'm gonna have to die because I don't have the money to pay for my health care. Like, I appreciate that so much. So when I do my taxes every year, am I a little agitated? Absolutely. I'm like, oh my God, that's a lot. But the alternative is that reduce my taxes, and then next time I need that emergency care, maybe I don't have the money. And not even so much for me. What about the people that are working at McDonald's part-time and they're making 15 bucks an
Right.
hour? How in the world would they ever afford to buy healthcare? Never. So my taxes are helping to pay for other people's health. And the moment they went in for emergency surgery and their life was on the line, I'm glad that I paid some extra money in my taxes to make sure that they were going to be okay. Um, I think we have to start trying to look at our expectations of the world and be a bit more appreciative for what we do have versus what we don't have. And I find in North America, anyways, in Western society, I find that we really struggle with that.
Yeah,
Um,
gratitude can have an enormous impact on there. Tyler, we've unpacked, just a shitload of stuff. We've talked about numerous expectations we put on ourselves, others have put on us, we put on the world. But where do you go from here? Like, how do you let go of those expectations without giving up hope? So, if expectations create suffering, are we supposed to have none? Where's the fine line, right?
yeah. I think the way I try to challenge myself around what am I expecting that I feel again, I always go back to my daughter because I think that's the truest and realest example. It's a constant battle internally, and I think that, if you really want to achieve happiness in your life, I think expectations is something you need to work at. Um, you know, the expectation I was putting on myself to fix all my daughter's problems was making me miserable because I couldn't fix every problem that she had, and so I was really feeling like a failure as a father because I was putting such a high expectation on myself. And now through journeying and learning more about that, my expectations on myself as a father and the ability to fix things, I've altered that. So, do I have an expectation that I'm going to be there for my daughter? That's never going to change. But how I be there for my daughter, I'm changing those expectations as I'm learning more and more about her. So, I always say, I think a child's mind is always, the most beautiful thing because they're so curious, they're so inquisitive, and they don't really have expectations because they don't really know what to expect in a lot of
Hmm.
situations. So, hey Jim, you want to go grab an ice cream? You're like, I'm 40, whatever. I'm an old man. Why the hell would I want to go grab an ice cream with you? Like, your expectations are, why do you think I would enjoy that? But if I said to a 5-year-old boy, he'd be like, oh, yes, because he didn't have an expectation that I was going to take him for an ice cream. And I think as adults, we need to start being a little more like kids. I'm going into this with an open mind and curiosity. I'm not really expecting a lot out of it. There might be some things I'm going to like. There's going to be some things maybe I don't like. But when I leave, I really should try and appreciate the good and whatever those things are that maybe wasn't quite what I expected or what I was hoping for. Then I just got to let it go.
Yeah, let's talk about the outcomes. Because it's really the outcomes that we attach ourselves to, right? Which really
Yeah,
generate or create that expectation. I alluded to it earlier in the episode, just about having, wanting to do a podcast. And then had I attached myself to that outcome of, okay, if I can't get to 100 followers, okay, I'm just going to stop this, right? Because then I would have attached myself to that outcome. And then the expectation would be that I'm not successful, right?
sure.
And then I lose the whole um, the whole reason why I'm doing it. So it's really shifting that word expectations to intention.
Mm,
Because my intention is to do this podcast as a self healing mechanism for myself. And I love creating. I talked about kind of how I like digital
yep,
design, all that stuff. And hey, if I have something that I feel relevant or feel is meaningful to somebody else, I want to be able to share that. But once I attach an outcome to it, then that generates a level of success or failure,
yep,
right? And then
yep,
once I do that, so I think we really have to step back from is the outcome as important as the journey, as the actual doing it. What is the
correct.
intention? Or do we intend to do something, or do we have an expectation that we have to achieve something?
Well, I think what we alluded to earlier, and the only person in that whole conversation about success or failure is you.
Mm,
You're the only consistent in that whole message, right? So, how do we shift how do we shift our happiness as it relates to what we achieve or don't achieve based on our expectations is internal is it's us, right? Um, I think there's situations where, I believe I've shown up the best that I can, but maybe I didn't exactly show up as good as somebody was expecting me to show up, as an example.
mm,
And I think what I'm learning in my trauma related incidents or triggers is that if I can truly say to myself, I did the best I could, I showed up the best I had in me or I could or whatever the case may be, that I have to celebrate those achievements or my intention, and I've achieved my intention and I have to celebrate that. I can't go home and keep beating myself up because I didn't meet the expectation of what somebody else believed I should be or whatever the case may be. But again, it's a dangerous game because we are in a world of, people pleasing.
right, right,
We don't want to piss anybody off. We want to walk away not disappointing anybody. Um, we put so much pressure on ourselves about making sure that everyone else walks away with everything they wanted, that we then walk away with an empty tank going, man, I really, you know, I'm not going to swear in your podcast, but I really messed up.
it's all good. You can.
Um, and is that fair? Sure, it's fair. Only in the context it's fair because you're the only one that's actually saying that you've done a bad job. If other
Right,
people think you haven't done a great job, then that's because you haven't fit their expectations. But are you trying to fulfill their expectations or you're trying to fill your own? And I think that's where the line gets a little skewed sometimes, is that sometimes we get so busy trying to fulfill others people's needs and expectations that, like I said the earlier of, the relationship I was in, I kind of started to lose myself.
right,
Um, so my expectations were actually starting not even becoming, they weren't even my expectations anymore. In my brain, the expectations I was putting on myself was somebody else's expectations that I've now absorbed. And because I was trying to achieve all that, I started to just lose who I was as an individual. Um, and so, I think my advice to everybody would be, you really got to have a hard chat with yourself, and give yourself a little leniency.
right. It's a great point too, right? Because it's almost like we always have to do something, be better, do more, in today's society with less. But I would challenge the listeners out there, right? What expectations are you carrying right now that's really causing unnecessary suffering? And again, pause the episode, journal it. Is there anything that you're really hanging on to that is an unnecessary expectation that you've just brought on through, again, beliefs of your parents or beliefs of social media or stuff like that. So I really do implore you to journal, take notes, and really ask yourself that question. And what would happen if you released it?
I was just gonna say, it'd be a really good test for your listeners to do. Go on
Mm.
a 1 week social media detox.
Yeah, I've done that. I went
Yeah,
when I got separated. I deleted it, I want to say for about a month.
yeah,
Big difference.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes a huge difference. And the reason why I did it during COVID.
Mm.
Because I remember during COVID, it was we were just getting into COVID. There was a lot of rioting in the U.S. for Black Lives
Yep.
Matter.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
There was a lot of things on social media that in COVID being stuck in our homes and social media was our only means of seeing what was going on around the world. It was chaos.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling so overwhelmed with what am I gonna do to meet where the world is and what am I expecting myself? And I said, you know what? I need to I gotta step away.
Yep.
So I backed away from everything for 2 weeks. I did it for 2 weeks. I got rid of all of my social media accounts. I didn't go on YouTube. I didn't watch any CNN. I didn't watch nothing. The only thing I would do is I would check the COVID. There was a COVID website to give you an idea how things were going. I would
Right.
check that daily just to see what's the news today. But I removed myself from all of social media. And I'm telling you, Jim, I never felt so settled and complacent in my own existence, in my own life, in my own household, knowing the world was going nuts um, as that time because I wasn't being influenced by anything outside of my home of what I should or shouldn't be doing or what do I stand for? What don't I stand for? Who do I believe in? Who do I not believe in? Do I want to get a vaccination? Do I want to get a vaccination? Like,
Yeah.
you
You
guys
bring
go
up
do
a
you.
great, you bring up a great discussion point, right? Because are humans even meant to know what we know? Just a sheer amount of information. You think of where we came
Mm.
from,
Yeah.
right? Before technology, are we even meant to know it? I mean, it's irrelevant because we know it. We can't not
No,
know it now.
it's,
But it
yeah.
really does bring up a great discussion point. It's are we meant to know it, and then how
And
much
that's what I worry
impact does it
about.
have, right? Yeah.
The question you had earlier with me around generations, right? That's what I worry
Mm.
about.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, my mother walked through life with her own challenges, but she didn't have all the other
Mm.
information that is available to you and I as there is today. And so what I worry about is, when my daughter is 35 years old, trying to start a family, whatever the
Mm.
case may be, by the time she gets to 30, I mean, geez, we ain't be living in a virtual world at that point. We'll all be sitting in our living rooms with headsets on and never leave our homes again. Who knows what's going
Yep.
to happen? But
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. Like, if there wasn't the accessibility to all of the other things around the world, I think it would make a huge difference in our own lives because you maybe be a little bit more appreciative for what you have because you're not being exposed to all the things that you believe you should have that you don't.
Sure.
Right? Like, why is there a 21-year-old guy on social media driving a Lamborghini with 4.5 million followers, and all he does is get online and go? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what the hell? Like, I get up and grind every day trying to grow my business, and I'm barely making ends meet, but you're on there with a little smile making millions of dollars because of social media. Like, huh? Right? But I can't then say my expectation is I'm going to become an influencer and I'm going to get 4.5 million followers and blah 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 because it's just not part of my life journey.
No, and we only
Um,
know what we see too, right? Like there's so
Absolutely,
much unknown in that,
I don't want to know
because
anymore. I really don't. I don't want to
right,
know anymore. I don't want to see anymore. I just want to live in my little bubble and moving on. But I really do worry about the next generations
yeah,
coming up with the
yeah,
exposure that they have compared to
right,
you and I, and compared to our parents, even nonetheless. But I
yeah,
also say, look, I don't want to be sorry, just to end my thought, I don't want to be a negative sayer only. I also believe that the exposure that you and I have also has allowed us a lot of freedom to heal from
mm,
things in our past because we've learned from other people that have shared their stories.
sure,
I hope that my daughter understands that if she's feeling a certain way, there are so many things out there that she's been exposed to of who she can talk to or reach out to, or what is schematic breathing, whatever you called it again, sorry.
Some somatic.
Somatic. So
Yeah.
somatic breathing. Well, if you didn't have social media, maybe you would have never been introduced to what that was, and it's been very beneficial to
Right.
you. So there's a lot of, I guess it's all about trying to trying to take in the good and keep the good, and try to let the bad go and ignore the bad and push it
Yeah.
out. But unfortunately, we're just absorbed with
Yeah.
information
Yeah.
overload.
Well, you really have to manage your own, your own expectations around what, to your point, what you take in,
Hmm.
um, you know, and what you ignore. So, listen, Tyler, this is a great conversation. And obviously the podcast here is called Design Your Life. And I don't think designing your life means designing every outcome. I think it really means designing the way you respond to whatever life brings, right? So when you go back now and kind of think about your expectations, I challenge you to really question where those expectations do come from. I think that's really the first step in understanding or differentiating between expectation and intentions, right? Is to really challenge yourself. So just, a little final thought. Actually, before I give that final thought, do you have any final thoughts that you might want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my final thoughts are is one, thanks for having me on your podcast and this episode. I think it's a great topic, and I think, I hope that if anyone can take anything away from this episode, between two old farts that have been there and been through a couple marriages, a couple good ones, couple bad ones, um, is that trying to manage your own mental health and happiness and self-esteem and those things a lot of the time are really directly associated to expectations. And I think if you really, really want to be happy and achieve great things in life, set realistic expectations for yourself. Do I think I'm going to, I was going to say, be a Donald Trump in the real estate market, not the presidency, but do I think, if my expectation is that Tyler Reed Real Estate is going to own a 74 floor townhouse in downtown St. John, that's probably unreasonable. And I'm going to probably be really miserable and unhappy for a very long time, because it's not just, it's not a feasible expectation of
Mm,
myself. Um, do I want to see a day that my real estate business provides a comfortable existence for myself and my daughter and her future? Yeah, I think that's a healthy expectation, and there's no reason that I can't achieve that. Knowing myself and knowing what I can do and what I think I can do to help grow my business. So I think being a bit of a realist with yourself, what is a real expectation? Jim, are you going to be, the podcast guru that I'm going to watch on Netflix in the next 3 months? Who knows, right? I'm not expecting that out of you, because you're not expecting that out of yourself. So I expect you to hold yourself accountable to what you want to achieve and your intent, and I want to support you in that. But I'm not going to say to you like, "Geez, you only got 100 followers, Jim. Like, what are you doing?" Like, like that's not a podcast. Like, you know what I mean? Like
yep,
it's
yep.
you also got to surround yourself with people that understand your goals and your expectations, and make sure those people mirror up to them. Um, I'm on the boat I'm on for my racing team, because I know my team just expects me to show up the best I can every day, and they celebrate that. And then it helps me to put a more reasonable expectation on myself to not be the pro sailor, because the team doesn't expect it of me. I can help better manage my own expectations of myself about what I'm going to show up each day. Um,
Right.
yeah, don't know if that makes sense, but that's the
No,
key thing I want to lead people with is
no, listen, I thank you for sharing it. And, the only final thought that I want to leave is, maybe peace isn't found, when life finally becomes what we expected. But peace begins when, we really stop expecting life to be something that it was never meant to be. So I just kind of want to leave you with that. And I want to thank our listeners. Tyler, I want to thank you for your time. I know you're busy, so greatly appreciate you being on the show again. And I'm sure we'll circle back and be on many more. But with that said,
thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Again, please like, please follow if these messages really resonate with you, and keep designing the life that's true to you.